Hi, I'm Lynn Ballinger. I'm standing here on top of the Acropolis in the center of Athens, Greece. We were in Thessaloniki, and we talked about when Paul came by water at night to this place. And history tells us that when his boat came, he would have come up a pathway into Athens that would be completely lined with all of these different gods and idols along the road. And history also tells us that he came up probably to this Acropolis. He surveyed the whole town, and the Bible actually says that he was just burdened in his heart because he saw an entire city given over to idolatry. But for the first time, he was in the place that God wanted him to be. And he would have come out just behind me on this side. He would have come up around here to this Parthenon, which is actually a temple to the goddess Athena, where they would come and worship along with other of the Greek gods and all of the things that people come here to see. And so from here, he went to the philosophers on Mars Hill. They're called the Areopagus, and he spoke to them and told them some things that was pretty amazing. Standing here on top of a very famous spot in Athens called Mars Hill, or what was called in the day of the Bible, the Areopagus Hill. The Areopagus were a group. It was a place where philosophers gathered, people would gather for all kinds of reasons. On this hill, there was places of temples of worship. There were different gods people would worship up here. There was a cemetery up here. For a time, there was actually even homes, and people lived here on Mars Hill. But most famously, this is the place after Paul went up to the Acropolis and he viewed and surveyed all of the idolatry that existed here in Athens. He came here and he began to speak to the Athenian people and the philosophers about the gospel. And he did something crazy. He actually took one of their idols and used the idol to preach the gospel. It was the idol to the unknown God. And he said, I want to declare to you who the unknown God is. And he began to teach them. He began to talk to them. He gained their interest. Some were very interested in what he had to say. Others mocked him a little bit. And in all of that time, there wasn't a lot of fruit. He didn't pray for anybody. There wasn't any demonstration in power. And what we understand from that is that the gospel message, even though it's a message of truth, and even though it's a life-changing message, the gospel without power comes across as just another philosophy, just another idea. And that's how people took it here in that day. And it was a real disappointment to the Apostle Paul. But not only were there disappointments, but there was some fruit, because let me tell you, the gospel message works. And there was one of probably a few people that found Jesus and gave their life to Jesus. One was named Dionysius. He actually later became the bishop or the head of the church here in Athens. And at one time, hundreds of years ago, they actually built a church. It's now destroyed, but built a church to Dionysius right up here on top of Mars Hill. And where you see the Parthenon behind me, you can also see spectacular views of the city of Athens. Behind me are people that are gathered here, kind of hanging out on the rocks and sitting and visiting. And that's very much the same kind of thing that would have happened in the days of the Apostle Paul. But when Paul left Athens, he really never came back here and never really spoke that much about it. But what we do know is that after he left here, he went to Corinth. And when he came to Corinth, everything in his ministry changed. He went with a whole different approach and built one of the great churches and began to see the whole world change for the gospel.